Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Salem Horror Fest 2018. Are we having a good time so far? Nice. Well, today marks the official kickoff of Haunted Happenings, which goes all month and some would argue all year long here in the Halloween capital of the world. Where is everyone from? Nice. Well, so Salem is known for many things, not all of them good, which is why our mission with Salem Horror Fest is to explore cultural themes of horror in the genre. The horror genre reveals so much about who we are as individuals and as a community. It's one way that we make sense of the world around us. And our keynote speaker tonight, he knows that from the work that he's done at Blumhouse Productions. As vice president, he has worked on many films, including the Purge series, in which we are warned of government-mandated violence. Get Out, in which reveals the many, many horrors of racism. The Unfriended series, which reveals the terrors that await in our pocket, in our phones and devices. Please put your hands together and welcome Mr. Ryan Turek.
Hello, how are you? Thank you so much for the introduction, Kevin. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here in Salem for the very first time. I'm ready to move here, if you'll have me. It's really strange that I grew up in Connecticut, and I've never been to Salem for some reason, so I don't know why. I know, it's crazy. But thanks to all of you for joining us tonight. It's gonna be pretty memorable. We've got Cassandra Peterson coming out soon. How many of you have never seen her movie, Elvira Mistress of the Dark? Raise a hand, I wanna see. All right, well, that's awesome. I'm a huge fan of that movie. And I can't wait for you to see it too. Let's get started by getting a few geek credentials out of the way. My favorite horror movie of all time is Tom Holland's 1985 film, Fright Night. Glad you agree with me. My favorite filmmaker is John Carpenter. I shamelessly love, and this is where I'm gonna lose you, Maximum Overdrive. Okay, all right, still with me, this is good. I have a revolving list of 5 titles I consider the best horror movies of all time, and those include John Carpenter's Halloween, Bob Clark's Black Christmas, Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre, George A. Romero's Dawn of the Dead, and John Carpenter's The Thing. One of those films usually shifts into the #1 spot depending on my mood, but none of those titles will ever leave the top 5. I'm a dyed-in-the-wool horror fanatic who grew up in Connecticut and gravitated to the macabre at the young age of 6 years old when I picked up my father's copy of Stephen King's Cycle of the Werewolf. Dad, thank you. My folks are in the crowd. Give them my sisters and my family's here. It was a mint condition first edition that reflected a vivid, startling display of lycanthropic mayhem, courtesy of the late, great illustrator Bernie Wrightson. I have to say, I was more than fascinated than terrified by the images that depicted a church full of werewolves, a farm of slaughtered pigs, and a police officer getting his face torn off. I truly believe that's when I officially came online as a horror fanatic. And I was 6 years old. Stephen King became my go-to author in middle and high school. Teachers would call my parents concerned about my literary diet of Misery, The Dark Half, It, and the Tommyknockers. School dances didn't interest me. If I was lucky enough to get a date to the junior prom, I slipped out early because that's what you do when the new issue of Fangoria hits the stands, and you need to know what happens in Mick Garris's The Stand television show, and you want to know what Fangoria has to say about the new Rutger Hauer movie called Split Second. So yeah, that was my dating life. Not much of one. I often roamed the horror section of my VHS church, known as Mad Mike's Video, and in high school, I'd peddle VHS copies of a supercut I made that combined Sam Raimi's Evil Dead 2 and an international cut of Army of Darkness. By using two VCRs to seamlessly edit the films together, so when Ash, and you guys might know this very well, when Ash gets pulled through the portal at the end of Evil Dead 2, he's automatically transported to medieval times. So what I would do is I would sync that up to the beginning of Army of Darkness, cut out all that stuff with Bridget Fonda, and so when he lands in medieval times, the movie begins and you've got 1 3-hour supercut. And I would take that and I'd sell it. And what I'd do with that money is I'd then buy more Japanese import laserdiscs. So flash forward through a nourishing film school experience in Manhattan to a 14-year-old journalistic career, co-founding dreadcentral.com. Let's give a round of applause. That website's still around. Steve Barton, who was the editor, just stepped down. It was really sad to see him go. Running shocktillyoudrop.com for 7 years. I don't know how many of you remember that. I don't blame you if you don't. A lot of the writing is now gone, which kind of sucks. I also contributed to Rue Morgue, and more importantly, that magazine I grew up on, the one that was my Bible, my travel guide through terrifying and weird entertainment, Fangoria magazine. And it's now back on stands this week. And I definitely recommend you check it out because it is absolutely incredible. It was an experience I would never forget working for that magazine. And during that time, I got to meet and interview all of my idols. Film school essentially never stopped. Through my conversations with the likes of Stuart Gordon, Wes Craven, George Romero, John Carpenter, Don Coscarelli, I learned about how the film industry worked. And later, I met Jason Blum. I had been offered to go on basically a college city tour with The Purge. And I said to Jason, "Why do you want me?" And he's like, "Buddy, listen, I want you to be my MC. You get the crowd riled up, you get them super psyched about The Purge, and then you get to see the movie and you get all the video content you want." And I said, "Okay, cool." During that time, I got to know him, and he would pick my brain about movies, and I'd pick his brain about movies. And basically, he plucked me out of the world of online horror film analysis for his feature film development team. And I've been lucky enough to serve as a co-producer on films like Happy Death Day, Truth or Dare, Unfriended Dark Web, and most recently Halloween, which is playing a few hours from now. And hopefully some of you get to go see that. So what's the appeal? Why have I dedicated my life to horror movies? There are myriad reasons, and they've evolved as I've gotten older. I think from the ages of 6 to 13, horror films were the forbidden fruit. Even though my parents allowed me to watch quite a few films as a youngster, there were still titles that were strictly off limits. That, of course, didn't stop me from tracking down Hellraiser, The Exorcist, or The Omen, or running off to a friend's house to watch all three after school. Sorry. Was I ever frightened by what I watched? Absolutely. But that was the thrill of it. I separated fiction from reality really early on. However, that didn't necessarily stop the nightmares I'd get after seeing the Blob devour a child in horrific graphic fashion thanks to the effects work of Tony Gardner. The kid's skull melting before my eyes was seared into my brain forever. The other scene that really freaked me out was hearing Tina's screams of terror as she fell victim to Freddy Krueger in the opening of A Nightmare on Elm Street. Horror movies made me more cautious. They made me alert. They made me more creative, maybe to a fault. Paired with a steady consumption of comic books, horror movies kept me busy in art class. In my junior year of high school, I told my period 3 art teacher, Mr. Kedvis, that I was going to demonstrate some practical effects to the class. I was inspired by Tom Savini's appearance on David Letterman. I don't know how many of you have seen those episodes of David Letterman where Tom Savini's come on. The one that inspired me was one of, I think, 3 appearances. He was showing off a wide range of gags, but there was one episode that stood out. Savini set Letterman's palm on fire using a special gel. That gag went off without a hitch. Mine did not. I was going to set my hand on fire just as Savini had done, right before my class. Of course, I didn't have all Savini's tools of the effects trade at my fingertips, so I improvised. I filled the classroom sink with water as backup just in case things didn't go as planned. Then I coated my hand generously with a simple moisturizer as protectant and chased that with a layer of rubber cement. With the eyes of my ambivalent classmates gazing upon me, I walked them through the gag. I explained how it would be used in movies and provided some great cinematic examples of full-on pyro effects. And with that, I struck a match. I held my hand out over the sink and I set my hand on fire. For about 3 seconds, I thought I was the greatest young effects artist in the world. Then the searing hot pain settled in, and I had no choice but to submerge my hand in the sink. What I didn't count on was the flaming rubber cement sliding off my flesh to float across the top of the water. So for the briefest moment, the sink was on fire. This was followed by much laughter, a little reprimanding, and Mr. Kedvis ran over to the sink, pulled the stopper, and let all the water out of the sink. But what stood out for me out of that experience wasn't the reaction of setting my hand on fire. It was from my fellow students who voiced their disdain for horror. They didn't get my little experiment. They didn't understand why I love those movies so much. They thought the whole thing was weird. They thought I was weird for being such an effects fiend and being so into horror. Which brings me to this bad reputation horror still seems to get. I'm going to use a most recent example. A few years ago, I was doing a late night screening, I think at South by Southwest, and I took a Lyft ride back to my hotel, and the chatty driver asked me what I did for a living. And my go-to answer is always, I help make scary movies. The driver threw me a side glance and responded, horror movies? And then he paused and he said, you must be pretty messed up. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh man, you're so getting a 0 rating. What I said was, on the contrary, I think I'm pretty well-rounded, and I've never met a more passionate and empathetic group of individuals when I'm surrounded by people in the horror community. I told him that horror movies can teach and entertain, provide an escape, and in that moment, I felt like a missionary spreading the gospel of scary storytelling. I'm not sure if I converted him into a scary movie lover that night, but it made me realize that there are still many people who have this skewed and antiquated perception of what horror movies represent and don't realize how far they have come today. If a trip to the newsstand is any indication, horror's popularity is back in full swing. Just before seeing Greg Plotkin's Hellfest last week, I brought my family to Barnes & Noble, and I counted the number of non-horror-related magazines offering cover stories on the genre just in time for the Halloween season. Parade magazine dedicated a whole special edition to the 200th anniversary of Frankenstein. How cool is that? Parade magazine. Even better, it's an informative and great read, and if you guys haven't seen this on the newsstands, you have to pick it up. It's really, really well done. Next to it on the shelf was something called the Ultimate Horror Movie Guide. All right, I'm with that. And next to that was some puzzle magazine that had the creature from the Black Lagoon on the cover. I chose not to get that one because they misidentified a picture of Gorgo and called the giant monster Godzilla. All of these magazines sat alongside the usual assortment of entertainment periodicals featuring the new Halloween film, making the magazine stand look like Horror Central. But beyond the content at my local bookstore, and just to further cement that horror entertainment continues to grow, there are now countless horror conventions where actors like Robert Englund, Doug Bradley, Tony Todd are willing to slip back into iconic makeup of Freddy Krueger, Pinhead, and Candyman, respectively, for photo ops with the fans. Meanwhile, Jason Voorhees action figures are no longer confined to specialty shops. I was just walking through Target, and they had really nice Jason figures in the toy aisle. Target, next to the Mad Balls and the fun Five Nights at Freddy's stuff. As for big screen frights, that's where horror's evolution is most apparent. We have definitely entered another prosperous horror cycle that's unlike any other. As we all know, the popularity of horror on a collective level goes in waves. A horror film will come along, strike a chord with an audience wider than the diehard genre fans, and inspire a thematic movement of sorts as studios and filmmakers clamor for a piece of the success. For example, who remembers the poorly nicknamed torture porn craze? James Wan's Saw, Greg McLean's Wolf Creek, Eli Roth's Hostel, and Alex Aja's High Tension drew screams from the crowd for their unflinching depiction of violence. These movies, accompanied by even more extreme offerings from France, like Inside, Martyrs, and Frontiers, embrace the hard R rating, daring viewers to endure their grisly tapestries of bodily harm. Sometime before that, we had the postmodern movement, instigated by Wes Craven's Scream. Scream introduced us to an all-new wave of slasher entries like I Know What You Did Last Summer, a new installment of Child's Play called Bride of Chucky, Scream 2, a shot-for-shot remake of Psycho, directed by Gus Van Sant, urban legend, Valentine, I can go on and on and on. These were meta wink-wink horrors that came with the glamour of an Abercrombie commercial and starred namey television actors at the time. Both of these cycles lasted a few years and announced their arrival in the loudest way possible. You can clearly define when they began and when they were taking their last gasp. The most exciting thing about this current horror cycle we're in is that it's not fixed to any particular fad. If you needed an identifying trait in today's horror climate, you could say that it's determined to clear away the cobwebs of genre tropes that audiences have grown tired of, to tackle larger issues at hand while still maintaining a sense of fun. As our country cries out for change, so does horror. The beauty of contemporary horror is moviegoers are responding to a diverse range of compelling narratives. And I'll tell you, behind the scenes in Hollywood, it's keeping everyone on their toes. The ongoing success of the Insidious franchise and the Conjuring shared universe reflect a stable appetite for supernatural thrillers. But when movies like A Quiet Place, Don't Breathe, and especially Get Out become big hits, it's hard to pinpoint any unifying quality other than they're just great. We're getting a great range of diverse horror films, and it's a good time to be living in this world. So in Hollywood boardroom conversations and creative meetings, terms like social thriller or high concepts and elevated are wielded to describe what kind of horror properties studios should be chasing. And those are pretty broad terms. When you say torture porn, you know exactly what you're going to get. When you say high concept, that can mean a lot. So the awesome thing about today's horror climate is that filmmakers are getting the chance to fly their freak flag and explore all manner of stories that inspire them. As a tangential aside, I really hate the term of elevated horror. When I hear it used, I just want to respond to the person with, oh, is that a fancy way of saying this movie is fantastic and scary and has characters you care for, just like all the other great horror movies that have come before? Elevated horror just drives me nuts. I'm often asked at Blumhouse, what are you looking for? What's the next big thing? The answer to the latter is downright difficult to answer. But I know the foundation of what makes horror work and what we're looking for, and it begins with character and emotion. If you strip all of the genre elements out of a horror story, does it stand on its own as a great drama? Look at all of the films that we love. Don't Look Now, Rosemary's Baby, The Exorcist. These are all films that you could strip away the genre elements, and they are great dramas and great character pieces. So later on tonight, perform this exercise. Pick some of your favorite horror movies and try to explain what the drama is at the core of the story without the genre elements. Obviously, it's not going to work for every movie, but it's a fun thing to analyze. Anyways, back to today's cinematic climate. Horror movies are feeling vital now more than ever. Critics and analysts will tell you horror thrives in times of turmoil, and they're not wrong. Historically speaking, audiences do flock to horror movies when the times get tough. The universal classic movie monsters were born out of the Great Depression. Hiroshima invoked the on-screen wrath of Godzilla and many other atomic age monstrosities. Vietnam gave us George Romero's Living Dead and a chainsaw-wielding maniac known as Leatherface. In the years following 9/11, we got Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later and George Romero's Land of the Dead, and I think you get the picture. I'm not breaking any new ground here by saying that horror movies are a catharsis that rewards not just the audience, but the filmmaker as well. For moviegoers, horror movies can release pent-up anxiety in a controlled environment. And boy, are we living in high anxiety. Horror can provide a much-needed escape from the nightmare of daily news headlines and give a moviegoer an opportunity to see their fears manifest on screen and, hopefully, see those fears conquered. Furthermore, if a horror movie can help lend new insight into things that keep you awake at night, maybe you could sleep a little easier. Speaking to the emotional rewards of a horror filmmaker, it's an opportunity to unleash their own anxieties. When I sit down for meetings with writers and directors, I encourage them to explore what's frustrating them, as some of the best horror movies come out of anger or dissatisfaction with something in their own lives, family, or society. Fine examples of this are Tobe Hooper's The Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Wes Craven's The Last House on the Left. Both were Vietnam-era horrors. John Carpenter's They Live, another great example. Jordan Peele's Get Out, one of the greatest current examples. And I have to often remind people that Get Out was written well before Trump became president. So Jordan Peele was pissed off about a lot, way before then. The aforementioned films have a very specific outlook on the world, and I truly believe horror movies excel when there's a confluence of a great scary concept and a director whose voice screams with his or her own identity. I mean, what's the point of making a movie if you're not going to apply your very own unique perspective of the world to the art you're making? Ever since our president was elected in 2016, I've been asked, when is a horror movie coming out that's a reaction to what's happening to our country? And my response is always to let that come about organically. Don't force it. Let filmmakers go off a feeling rather than reverse engineer a movie based on specific news headlines or a world development. And to those horror fans that get riled up on message boards and Twitter asking to keep politics out of horror, to that I say, horror has always been political, but not every horror movie has politics in it. Some of your favorite horror movies probably have some level of political undercurrent in it. Stick around this very festival, and you'll watch George Romero's Day of the Dead. And tell me there's no reflection of 80s politics in that, or hell, even today's politics. Romero had a lot to say then, and it came out of a place of frustration. So to wrap this all up, I just want to convey, horror movies are healthy for your cinematic diet. Horror, over the last century or so, has proven to be one of the greatest genres to smuggle sensitive and important topics, while at the same time frighten you with roller coaster thrills. And best of all, horror movies are supported by the best community I have ever known, and it's one that's quick to help others understand the genre. So a big thank you to festivals like Salem Horror Fest, and a big thank you to you horror fans for making this genre great. Thank you. Stick around because I'll be interviewing Cassandra soon.
Okay, you know her, you love her, and she's here tonight. So Salem, Massachusetts, please stand up and greet your queen.
Wow. Oh, is this on? Oh, hi. Oh, how's your head? Okay. Do you need water? Oh, that would be good. Hi, guys. Oh, I love this. Look, Salem's bitchin'. Did you guys see that 1980-something Salem special from MTV? Oh, my God.
That's awesome.
Take it from
Oh my God, it's like you split in half.
Salem's bitchin'. That was so fun to do that here. Long time ago, before any of you were born, there was this thing called MTV. Oh, yeah. Anyway,
I remember
okay.
that when they showed music videos.
What?
What are music videos?
Yes. We don't know.
Well, we're here because your film, Elvira Mistress of the Dark, is celebrating its 30th anniversary. And I believe Arrow Video just announced they're going to be doing a, I know, it's harrowing back there. Yeah, I'm so excited. And I believe Arrow Video just announced that they're going to be doing a special edition. Have you? Yeah. That's very smart. Very smart.
It's kind of scary.
Yeah, I know.
If I lean back or something. Okay. All right.
Did you have anything to do with this special edition that's coming out soon? Have they called out to you to participate?
What, the special edition?
The special edition of Elvira Mistress of the Dark? The
Blu-ray? No. Unfortunately, I don't have anything to do with that Blu-ray or the movie. The movie I was paid to write and star in, and that was it. I was paid. Never again did I see any money from that. Yeah, I love the movie, but it's a bummer.
Wow, that's a terrible way to start this. And I was just going to kind of reverse engineer and go back and talk about, well, you got paid, but that must have been an exciting time to take this character from the small screen to the big screen. Can you just to give a little history as to how that came about?
Yeah, it was funny. Brandon Tartikoff, who was the president of NBC, came to me and he loved the Elvira character and he wanted to do a television show about Elvira. And they came up with some concepts where I was a teacher, a monster class, and this and that. And I had in my head, I don't know where I got this, but that, oh, look at bats on the wall. I love that.
So easily distracted by the macabre.
Yeah. Ooh, look, that's what my
Rabid
daughter always
dog.
says. I'm like, ooh, look, a squirrel. Anyway, I don't have a good, thought. Anyway, so Brandon Tartikoff came along and said, do you want to do a TV show? And I said, I would love to do a TV show, but first I want to do a movie. Because back in those days, if you did television, you would never, ever, ever do a movie. I mean, believe it or not, you did no actors. You can look this up all you want. Went from TV into feature films. Nowadays, it doesn't matter. You can go films, TV, films, back and forth. Then that was it. And I said I had this dream of doing an Elvira movie, and I just wanted to do that first before doing any TV. Big mistake. But anyway, Brandon said, okay, we'll do a movie. We'll finance it for you. So we made this movie, and NBC financed the film, which they had never done before. And
what was the budget? Do you remember?
The budget was about $13 million, which...
Holy smokes.
Yeah, which, it was not big by any standards, but it was better than a poke in the eye with a sharp stick. So I was happy to do anything, So, well, that's it. That's how it came about. I mean...
And I know did you guys shoot on the Universal backlot or Warner Bros.?
Yeah, first we started out at Universal. That was a really fun thing. We started out at Universal backlot, and every 15 minutes, a tram came by, and they'd go, "This is Elvira Mistress of the Dark, shooting her feature film from NBC." And that would be right in the middle of your line that you finally got right. And that went on for about 3 days until we said, this is not possible. We have to go somewhere else. And we went to Warner Brothers and shot the rest of the film there.
Well, I remember at the time when it came out, this was during the time when the New York Times used to have a big entertainment section where all the studios would do big splashy one-pages of the posters. And I remember Elvira Mistress of the Dark had a one-page thing. And I was like, this is a big deal. This is an event. I need to see this movie. And how was it received back then? I don't remember at all.
Oh, yeah, how it was received. Oh, my God. It was, we had a fantastic opening at Grauman's Chinese Theater, and then a big celebrity-studded party at Roosevelt Hotel across the street in Hollywood. And then we had another fantastic party in New York at Tavern on the Green. I came in a gondola across the lake in Central Park, and the creature from the Black Lagoon came up and tried to get me. It was so incredible. And then the movie came out, and New World, this sounds like sour grapes, but New World, the distributor, went bankrupt that day, and all the theaters dropped my movie, just like that, like a hot potato. It was going to be in something like, I don't know, 2,500, 3,500 theaters, and it ended up in 500 theaters. And nobody, not even Star Wars, could be a hit if they were released in 500 theaters. So that was the end, straight down the tubes.
But thanks to the VHS era, it found its audience.
Yes.
Everybody's here to see it.
Yeah, I lucked out. It's actually, when home videos were still happening, it was in the top 60 all-time video rentals. So that was good, right? Yeah.
That is good. That's good.
Yeah. I didn't get any money for that.
We'll get to audience questions in a moment, but I'm curious, Cassandra, what was your earliest horror memory? What was that first horror film that just clicked with you?
Oh, well, I remember that very well. I was in 2nd grade, and I went with my cousin Danny to the Chief Theater in Colorado Springs, Colorado, to see House on Haunted Hills with Vincent Price. It was like some kind of freaking epiphany for me. I don't know why. I kind of loved and hated the film at the same time. I had nightmares for a month afterwards, but I couldn't wait to see Vincent Price in another horror movie. Again, I was just like, oh my God, I have to see more of that. And so my cousin snuck me out. My parents wouldn't let me go see them. My cousin snuck me to various Roger Corman films that, whoa, the light came on.
Got more light.
Roger Corman films that starred Vincent Price, kind of the Poe series that he did. And I met, Vincent Price and hung out with him many times, but he always said to me, yes, Elvira, those were definitely Poe movies. But anyway, but those changed my life. Next thing, I was buying Famous Monsters of Film magazine, and I was buying the, do-it-yourself kits of The Mummy and Dracula and everything. And I was just totally hooked when I was a little kid. And that was really weird back then, and really weird, especially for a girl. So I had no friends. Everybody stayed away from me. Yeah. No, so.
Did you ever, I imagine Vincent Price is a pretty awesome person to meet, but did you ever get starstruck? Was there any horror celebrity that you ever got starstruck by?
Well, Vincent Price, he came on my show, and we asked him if he would come on Movie Macabre for my Halloween special, which was so incredibly cheesy. This is when my show was still local in LA. And he said yes, because he was doing a play of Oscar Wilde in Westwood in LA. And he said, if you will pitch the play, I'll come on and do your show. And we were like, what? I never imagined it could happen. And then he was on my show, trick-or-treating at the door. It was like ding dong, and I was Elvira, and I opened the door and I said, hi, Elvira, I'm Vincent Price. I was like, I could hardly talk. It was really, really a trip for me. And over the years, we became friends because every time there was any kind of a horror award or horror event or a talk show where there were different horror people on it, Vincent and I were there, and saw him many, many times and became very friendly with him and just adored him. It was like a dream come true, really, And he was such an incredible guy. And I always said he should be a comedian because he was the funniest damn guy I ever met, I think. Really, really had a funny sense of humor.
And awesome cookbooks, too.
Awesome cookbooks, and he taught me how to make fish in the dishwasher.
What? How does that work?
He told me how to make a fish recipe. You put fish in aluminum foil, and then you put salt and pepper and butter, and then you wrap it up, and then you wash your dishes, and when the dishes are done, the fish is perfect. So there you go.
Amazing.
You might want to try that at home.
I just want to turn to merchandise really quick because a friend just gifted me with the Elvira cereal, which has to be one of my favorite pieces of Elvira merchandise that I own today. I'm curious, you've seen everything come out from action figures to t-shirts and so on. What's the most oddball favorite piece of Elvira merch that you've ever seen?
Well, I'm pretty damned in love with the Elvira cereal right now, I'll tell you. It's doing really, really great. It actually came out at Hot Topic stores and sold out the same day. And they're doing a second run of it right now. Be careful if you eat a lot. This is not good.
I haven't tried. Does it make your tongue black?
I found out the hard way.
Oh.
Anyway, but it's really, really good. It tastes like Fruit Loops, but it turns everything black. Okay, that's all I'm going to say.
Familiar.
Yeah,
Yes.
okay. Some of my favorite things, the slot machine. I love the slot machine. I won $300 on it when I was in Vegas last time. It was awesome. I never win at slot machines, ever. And my pinball machines, I have a special place in my heart for them. They're, party monsters and scared stiff, which I love because I'm kind of a pinball addict. I love pinball. I have to say, I have a friend here who was married to my old boyfriend, and before they were married, and he was my boyfriend, he was my boyfriend? Okay, wait, that's from another movie. Okay, we went to places and played pinball all the time and drank beer, and I fell in love with pinball, and so to get a pinball machine of my own was kind of like winning the Academy Award. It was super awesome. Yeah, I hope you don't mind me talking about your husband, Harriet. Anyway.
Was there a particular pinball machine that you were personally addicted to that was not Elvira related?
God, I don't know.
The Creature from
I
the Black
can't
Lagoon
even think
one's
of
pretty
it
good.
back then. It was so long ago. I don't know. You just sprung one on me. I don't remember. I had drank too much beer.
What is your day-to-day like? I mean, in terms of with all of the Elvira empire. I mean, do you have your hand in every single piece of this merch, like in terms of approvals and all
I
that
have
stuff?
my hand in every single piece of merchandise. And when I'm not working like tonight, I'm doing all day long approvals and notes and from everything from my new comic book to my new line of clothes to my line of jewelry. I'm okaying them, sending back okays, finding out when they're going to come out, when we're going to release them on my website. It's a full-time job, pretty much like a 24-hour gig.
I'm really enjoying the comic book, by the way.
Thank you. I'm very happy with it, too. Thank you. I really like the comic book. I don't know if you guys have seen it from Dynamite Comics, and I'm really, really thrilled with what they're doing. They're coming out with a new one that's The Shape of Elvira. It's a parody of The Shape of Water, and which I love. And so that's really fun.
That's awesome. Let's open the floor to a question. Anybody got any questions right here?
Hi. I know that I believe that your iconic costume was designed by Robert Allen Redding. And I know that your character has been linked to hereditary witches. And I was wondering if you chose to have the dagger on the front of the outfit, or if that was something that Robert Allen Redding came up with, because in traditional witchcraft, the dagger actually means something to have it at the waist, and so I was wondering if that was your idea, his idea, or you collaborated with, or how that came about.
Well, I have to credit Robert with that because in the beginning, when I first did the costume, I went out and found a belt at Bullock's, which is a department store that no longer exists. And I found this little belt that had a leather pin in it, holding it together in the front. And a couple of years went by, and Robert played the character of Hecate in Macbeth. Hello. Oh, you're not supposed to say that name. Anyway, he played the character of Hecate, the main witch in Macbeth. And in it, he had a jeweled dagger. And he said, you know what, we should do a jeweled dagger like this one to put in the belt instead of that leather pin. And so he was an artist, and he designed that little dagger, and we put it in there. I loved it. And it got stolen out of my suitcase on a trip somewhere. I had another one made finally, but that original dagger got ripped off. Oh, dude, I'm still looking for it on eBay. If you happen to see a dagger, let me know.
And I believe that there are early...
It has an E on the back of the hilt.
I was going to say, I think you could find sketches of it, too, in the coffee table book that you came up
Yes,
with.
there are sketches of the original thing.
That
in the
book is
coffee
amazing.
table book.
I love that book so much. Is there more material for another one, you think? Or
Oh, there was a lot of material.
There is a lot of material.
Actually, the person who put that book together is here tonight, Chad Colby.
Oh, well done.
Woo! Let me tell you, I never thought that book would get together. If it hadn't been for him, it would never have happened. But there was a lot of material, right, Chad? Yeah. Probably enough for 10 books, right? But he winnowed it down to the best of the best, and so I'm very proud of that book and happy that he was able to accomplish that major feat.
Oh, I love it. All right, any other questions? Right there, sir. Yeah, you.
Two-part question. First, why didn't the Elvira show get past the pilot? And second of all, why does it feel like the movie is being bought earlier? I feel like Thinking 2, was it written a lot earlier and then developed later?
Okay, you're going to have to repeat the question.
I think the first question was, why didn't the Elvira
the CBS TV show?
go past pilot?
Yeah, the pilot. Okay, that's another sour grape story. You can tell, I'm so bitter that my spit could make lemonade. Yeah, no, that was a crazy story, man. I'll try to give you the abridged Reader's Digest version. We did that TV show. It was like happening. CBS loved it. It was going to be a go. Everybody was, this is the best thing we ever had. And the head of CBS, oh God, what was his name? I can't even remember now. Anyway, he got sick and was out the week they chose the shows for CBS that season. And they brought in a guy named Howard Stringer, who was head of sports from New York to LA to pick the shows. And Howard saw 1 second of my show and said, "We can't have boobs like that on CBS," and that was it. I was gone. It's funny, if you look it up that year, they picked a lineup of shows which none of them repeated again, ever. They ran that season, they were all done. So Howard really had a knack for picking the shows. It was great. But unfortunately, I was in that, and that was it. Got cut. And then a weird thing happened. A year or two later, they came out with, what's that show? It was exactly the same. What was it? Sabrina, the teenage witch. And she was much more younger than me. And they did basically the same show with the teenagers, so, okay. Never mind.
And I think the second part of your question was Elvira, Mistress of the Dark, feels like it was developed a little bit earlier in the 80s? 82, 6-year difference.
What? It feels like
it's an 82 movie as opposed to an 88 movie.
an 82 movie? What?
1982, I don't... When did you start developing or writing the script for Elvira, Mistress of the Dark? Was it?
We started in like 88.
Oh.
No, 88?
87.
No, 87.
Yeah.
It took 3 years to make that movie, from pitching it to writing it, pre-production, filming it, post-production, 3-year period to do the movie. And then it came out, big bomb. I went into like a depression for a year where I didn't want to ever do Elvira again. I had quit Movie Macabre to do that movie, so I thought, this is my big moment. And yeah, total bomb. Anyway.
No more sour
so
grapes.
That's a really sad story. Never mind.
Who's got a happy question? Right here.
My favorite part of the movie, oh my God, I loved doing the movie. I loved writing it the most. The writing was fantastic. Myself, my partner, my writing partner, John Paragon, and Sam Egan, who they put with us because he was like the adult. John and I were like 2 kids in a candy store. And we had an office, and we went in there every day and ordered like tons of food and had like just laughed and joked all day long writing it. And Sam, the adult, kind of put it together in some form. And I never had so much fun in my life when other than when I was laying down. And anyway, and it was the best time in my life. So really writing it was the best time. Filming it was hard. It was pretty grueling. I later realized when we were filming it that we had written myself into every single frame of the movie, So I had no breaks, no relaxation, no time to sleep. I was there at like 6 a.m. every morning starting my makeup, and I was there until 2, 3, 4, 5 in the morning every night. Went home, slept 2, 3 hours, back. It was intense, really, really, really intense. But I learned a valuable lesson. Don't write yourself into every single frame of the movie. Okay. That's a little advice for you.
Did you find the process a little bit challenging in terms of the humor that you could, maybe the timing of the humor that you can get away with on TV versus feature film? Were there some gags that just, you were like, oh my God, this doesn't work at all. Like, let's throw this out.
Well, it was so much more fun because we could do things that we'd like to do on TV, but that we couldn't because of the censors. And we still were PG-13, so there was a lot of things that were thrown out. I mean, I can't imagine, I can't believe I got away with some of the stuff I did, like twirling tassels, that was fine. But it was just hit or miss. We'd write things and they'd go, oh no, you can't say that. And then hunting duck, with the F in front of it, that was fine. We just never knew what it could be. But it gave you a great deal of freedom after doing a TV show where you really were pretty restricted to being able to do, a little edgier stuff. So that was fun.
Awesome. You right here? Yep.
I've just been dying to tell
Vincent Price and you know a lot of it. Any fun Vincent Price Elvira stories? Like, but I know Vincent Price was a producer.
I can hardly hear.
Any fun Vincent Price stories, as Vincent was known to be a prankster?
A Vincent Price story?
Yeah.
I mean, oh my God, there were a lot of fun ones, but oh gosh, what would be my most fun? Well, once I was on what was the guy's name? It was a talk show, the Tom something. My brain doesn't work that well anymore. It was some talk show, late night talk show, but I was on with Vincent Price and Stephen King at the same time. That was pretty freaking awesome. I don't know, every time I saw him, I was giving him a word. The one thing about Vincent is his wife, Coral Brown, didn't really want me around all that much. She was like never that friendly to me. And I don't know, she made it a little tough for a while, but later we became really friendly when she knew I was safe. And I don't know, I just loved him. He was always gracious and always, interesting and, like I said, very, very funny. And I don't know, every time I saw him, I was thrilled out of my mind. I could hardly speak. I was so verklempt.
What were your first impressions of Stephen King?
Stephen King was awesome, just super laid back, easygoing, so nice, And I happen to absolutely adore Stephen King and his books and his movies. I mean, I've always been a huge fan of his. And the best Stephen King book, I'm going to pitch this right now, is Stephen King on Writing. If you haven't read that, man, I've read that 10 times. That is such a brilliant book. And it's kind of his autobiography, where he grew up, how he grew up. It's such an amazing book. And the even better than the book is the tape where he reads it, it's amazing. If you at all like Stephen King, you really must get the tape and listen to him talking about his life. It's so incredible. Even if you don't want to write or anything, it doesn't have anything to do with that. I mean, it's great if you're a writer and you want to, learn something, but you don't need to be. So there's a plug for it. I'm not even getting any money to say that.
How are you personally staying creative? Are you still doing a lot of personal writing? What's keeping those creative gears going for you?
I write all the time, every day practically, for different things. I'm trying to write my autobiography, but I never get time to do that damn thing. I hope someday it'll come out before I'm, too old to do it. I've gotten maybe halfway through, I don't know, but I really need kind of concentrated time to sit down and do it, and I never get that. But I do write scripts for different TV shows or whatever. I'm writing on that, but and I'm writing a treatment right now that I'm pitching for a new movie.
You can tell me more about that.
I can't tell you a lot. I had an idea for a film, and I've taken it a few places. It would be a cable network. It would not be released on in feature film. But it would be like a Netflix or a Hulu or whatever.
Or Blumhouse?
Huh?
Or Blumhouse, maybe?
Maybe.
Maybe we should talk.
Shutter TV. And I have many meetings set up in November to take that to, so I'm just like, crossing my fingers.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Another question, right back there, sir.
Was shooting the show at all like it's portrayed in the beginning of the movie? Shooting the TV series, was it all like you showed it in the film, the beginning of the film?
Was the film an accurate depiction of how the TV show was? The beginning of Elvira Mistress of the
Oh, it was an exact accurate. It was exactly like that. I was in a tiny, tiny little studio. I'm going to get some of this water before I start. Would you mind opening that for me? I was in a little tiny studio at a local television station. Excuse me one second. And I had to get my show done between the 12 o'clock news and the 6 o'clock news. And so we just had that much time. The map did not actually drop down in front of my face. Pardon me, but it almost did. I mean, they would say, Elvira, you've got 15 minutes till the 6 o'clock news. And it was just, we'd panic and we'd just say everything really, really fast. It was just a black backdrop and a few really bored people there trying to get me through the show. And it was brutal, the lowest low budget that you could ever think of. So yeah, that was a very accurate portrait. I didn't really have that guy, the Longhorn guy, but close to it. I did an interview today, and someone, the woman that interviewed me said, it's very relevant now that you were sexually assaulted in the first act of your movie, you know? Yeah. I go, yeah, tell me about it, sister. Yeah, when you're wearing that outfit, you know.
Yeah. One more question right here.
What is the most ridiculous piece of merchandise that you had to say absolutely no, my name's not going on that card?
The most ridiculous piece of merchandise, I signed one tonight. It was the smelly car hanging thing. They actually brought it. It was the thing that hangs in your car and smells. And it's like, what does Elvira smell like? I don't know. I don't know if I want to know. But I think that was the most ridiculous thing. I mean, come on, really? A smelly car thing? I don't know. Okay. I've done some pretty crazy things. The pillowcases, I don't know. Things like that.
The mouse pad cracks me up.
The what?
The mouse pad. The new mouse pad that you have. Yeah. I saw that. Because you have that pop-up shop in Hollywood and Highlands.
I do. I still have that suite at Candy Store. And actually, my car is there, my original couch. If you ever go to Hollywood, go to the corner of Hollywood and Highland, and a lot of my costumes and
jewelry.
Everything.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Oh, that's awesome.
It's a really fun store, actually. It's pretty awesome to have all
fun.
that stuff there.
One more. It's got to be good. Yeah, way in the back. Waving your hands. Hey, the famous guy.
Just one very important question. How's your head?
I already said that. Haven't had any complaints lately. Okay, thank you. I thought you were going to ask about your maquettes and your book that you sell on Elvira.com.
But I do want to say, I should say really quickly, there's tons of material for a second book if people want it.
Awesome. So new book, autobiography, new show or movie. I'm in. All right, great. One more question right here, and then we'll wrap it up. Yeah, waving.
Your comments in the casting process, did you think you had some really great characters? I love Chastity Mariah. What were some of your favorite characters in the how involved were you thinking and in the development of the character?
Did you guys hear that? He wanted to know about the characters and
how much
in
control
the movie.
you had in picking.
I was 100% involved from the very beginning. We actually wrote the character of Chastity Pariah around Edie McClurg because we knew Edie McClurg is Chastity Pariah. No, and we wrote, John and I specifically wrote that character for her. The funny thing with the casting, I was in casting every single day with the casting director from NBC and the producer and the director, and every day we saw all the characters and we picked who we wanted. I was in on every single thing. And I don't know if you guys knew, but for one of the characters, we had someone come in, and all I wrote in the notes, she wrote notes about if they were good actors or they to this or to that or whatever, and you'd have a list and you write all your little notes. So this one actor, all I wrote was yum yum, and it turned out to be Brad Pitt. Yeah. Brad auditioned for the character that Chris Cam ended up playing, the blonde teenager. And I didn't pick him, of course, because the reason I remember exactly the reason I didn't pick him. He was so freaking hot that if he would have been in that movie, Elvira would not be in love with her boyfriend. She would have been chasing the teenage boy, and that would just not have been good, you know? Because they were supposed to be underage, but the teenagers were all really in their 20s, you know? Yeah. But damn, he was so incredibly hot. And so later, it was a funny story. Later, he came to see this house I had. I had a pretty amazing house in the Hollywood Hills, a 1901 craftsman house on 2 acres. And Brad rang my doorbell That's a whole long story. I won't go into. Anyway, and came to the door. I was 9 months pregnant, so it was bad timing. But anyway, he asked to buy my house, and I ended up selling it to him. But I told him, Brad, you should really be thanking me because I single-handedly saved your career. And he's going, oh, why is that? And I go, because I didn't hire you for Mistress of the Dark, or you wouldn't have never gone on to do anything. I mean, you know, it was like the kiss of death. Oh, well, but he was awesome. And he was...
If you want to see young Brad Pitt, Cutting Class is probably around that era. You can see young Brad Pitt.
Yeah.
Well, Cassandra, thank you so much
You're
for joining us. Big round of applause. Get on your feet. Thank you so much.